Hi, Barbara here, and welcome to this month's episode of Lessons from Leaders. Now, today I'm really excited because I'm going to be talking to Keith Ruddock, who is a seasoned managing director and has got experience in a diverse range of industries, such as food production, food distribution, packaging, printing, waste management, and even mining. Now, for the last 5 years, Keith has used all of that experience to help the owners of SMEs in the Yorkshire region. He helps people with in terms of business advice. He works as an interim director, a non-executive director, and this has been deployed across a number of different sectors and in businesses with turnovers ranging from 100k right the way through to 35 million. He also leads the Yorkshire Business Alliance, which is a peer-to-peer group for owners who would like to grow their businesses and develop their business skills. Now, in today's episode, we talk about Keith's journey as a leader, and he shares some of his lessons from being a managing director. So I know there's going to be loads of takeaways for you. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in there. Hi, Keith. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Barbara.
Hiya. So before we start, can you tell us a bit more about what you do and a bit about your journey? Describe your journey for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, the last 5 years I've been working as a business advisor, interim manager, and non-exec director, and that's been a really interesting journey for me because it's my first foray into the world of small and medium-sized enterprises. Prior to that, my career had largely been with corporates. Started off life as a mining engineer with British Coal back in the day. Then went on to do a full-time MBA at Warwick Business School, which then led me into working for PepsiCo at Walker Snack Foods in Leicester. After a few years there, I moved into packaging. So ran a factory in central Leeds for a few years, and then that led me into printing with a company called R.R. Donnelly, who were a Chicago-based multinational. I had 12 years with them and ran some fairly large businesses, had up to sort of 800 people working for me and managed P&Ls of up to 75 million, worked internationally, so I had a great time. And then that led me into what I'm doing currently. And as I say, I work with a variety of SME owners, right from almost one-man or one-person bands, right up to 35 million pound businesses with 200 employees, and I work across most sectors as well.
So you've had a really varied career, haven't you? And you've done so much in that time. So, and you mentioned that you managed up to 800 people. So what was that like? What was it like managing such a large company?
Well, first of all, as well, those people were spread across 5 or 6 different sites across the UK, which obviously adds to the complexity. But not to oversimplify it, at the end of the day, nobody can manage that many individuals. So obviously what you do is you manage the team, you manage your direct reports. So even in that situation, my direct reports probably numbered 6 or 7 people. So they were the people that I managed, and obviously they got their teams at their individual sites that they managed. So the numbers to me don't make a huge difference on a day-to-day basis. But I think what you've got to think about as a leader, as the numbers do increase, you've got to focus more and more and more on communication. Because you can become remote, from the people that deliver the service, deliver the product, and they can become remote from the business as well, because you're not disseminating information to them in terms of how the business is going, what's happening with the business, where it's going, what's their job security looking like, what's their chances of growth in terms of personal development, things like that. So communication becomes a bigger issue, and also you mustn't lose sight of the fact that people still need development plans, they still need goals and objectives, and you need to make sure that those are cascaded down through the organisation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. Communication is fundamental to absolutely everything. So how did you make sure that your message wasn't diluted as it got cascaded down?
Well, there's various formal structures that can be adopted in terms of communication, which you'll be familiar with. You know, things like message boards, things like employee meetings. So, you know, addressing, you know, the people at a given site directly, and also ensuring that local management are having similar discussions on a more regular basis. So you can ensure that those structures are in place. But one technique I picked up from working for the Americans, and maybe it's not an American idea, I don't know, but was to hold what they called town hall sessions, and we might call them the listening groups. Mm-hmm. So getting some people, employees into a room, maybe a dozen people, say, right, there's only 2 rules. This meeting lasts for an hour, and whatever you tell me doesn't go out of this room unless you give me permission, and get people to you know, speak about what they see and what they feel in their day-to-day lives in the business. And that, I found that to be very, very useful. Obviously, it takes a while to build up the trust, but people can be quite forthright and they can give you some good information. So I found that to be quite useful in terms of almost like a feedback loop and sense checking what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that we could also refer to them as town hall sessions, but more listening groups. Yeah, I think that's what I tend to call them. What a fabulous way of just getting touching base with people and finding out what's actually going on, and you know, at grassroots level, because it is easy to get disconnected, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say was your top tip when it comes to communicating with your team? Because I know for a lot of people it's that consistency and doing it on a consistent basis rather than cancelling and rescheduling meetings and, you know, doing it ad hoc. What would you say was your probably number one tip for ensuring that communication does happen and it's effective?
With direct reports?
Yeah.
I think you probably hit the nail on the head there, Barbara, in terms of being consistent. So, for instance, if you have a review meeting, you know, let's say with a site manager or with the combined team, and you say, right, we're going to have these every month or every 3 months or whatever it is, or every week, you've got to make sure they happen. Because if they don't, then obviously people read into that actually they're not that important anyway. The meetings aren't that important, therefore the content's not that important, therefore what the heck. So I think once you've communicated that you're going to have a certain structure, certain schedule, it's absolutely critical to stick to it. And I think, you know, you can read some of the literature about, you know, how businesses go from, you know, being small, medium-sized enterprises and they scale up, and you know, people talk about getting the rhythm set up within the business, and certainly the rhythm of communication, the rhythm of review, you know, at set times. I think that's really, really important, because it focuses people's minds between those meetings, between those sessions, between those forums.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Yeah,
it does completely make sense. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of, you know, that's where the magic is, isn't it? Making sure that they're consistent. Otherwise, they just become lip service, don't they? And you know, meaningless. So let's go back to your career. And obviously, as you progressed and as you kind of climbed the ladder, at what point then do you think that you really felt like a leader, if you ever did?
That's a good question. I think there are different degrees of leadership, and I think they are defined really by time scale. So, for instance, as a 23-year-old, I was a supervisor on a coalface with 30 odd miners. For that shift, my role was to lead their activities. But at the end of the shift, that was it. Bang, you're done, and that's it till the next shift. So it's very short term. It's very reactive. There's no need to think about, well, how are we going to develop these people or whatever, and there's no business input or anything like that. But then as you obviously progress through the ranks, as it were, the time scales tend to get longer, and the subjects, the areas that you get involved in become more about, the longer term development of the business. And I think, in answer to your question, I was made a vice president and MD of a print site in 2002, which had about 400 people on it, operating 7/24. And all of a sudden, I was responsible for that business, for the next sort of 3 to 5 years, and had to develop plans to see the business over that period of time. It wasn't just about, well, what we're doing today, what we're doing tomorrow. It was about, well, what we're doing next year and the year after that. So that the time frames tend to extend, I think, as you get into more senior positions, which is good and bad. And I think, in answer to your question, when you start thinking about 400 people over a 2, 3, 4 year time horizon, that then does give you a real sense of responsibility in terms of leadership. And you're there, to help to protect their welfare as far as possible, to protect their economic welfare, health and safety, and all the rest of it. And that is a real leadership role.
Mm-hmm. So how did that feel, to be responsible for all of those people?
It felt good.
Mm-hmm.
It felt good. I mean, it's like anything else. You get confronted with problems that you've never encountered before, and you think, beam me up, Scotty. Let's hope this one goes away. And obviously they never do. But no, I felt good. I enjoyed that responsibility. And I think the thing is that if people around you see that you're enjoying it, and people around you see that you're committed, and you're not just playing lip service to it, you start to get that commitment back from them.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but you just get a sense, walking around a shop floor with people, talking to people that you only see every couple of weeks, and just having a chat with them. And also, it's not just about business, it's about, what's happening in their personal lives, what's happening with the football team, that type of thing. That's all very important to them. Therefore, I think as a leader, it's incumbent that you engage on those levels, as well as, purely business as well.
Mm-hmm. And I completely agree with you. And those are habits that you can instill on all aspects of your journey, really. You don't have to be, the MD to do that. You can, you can do it at whatever level you're at. Yeah,
agreed. I mean, it's, people talk about focus, and they talk about clarity, and they talk about objectives, which are all very, very important. But we're not robots.
Yeah.
And, I think, even to the point of, having a bit of a joke, a bit of a laugh now and again at work. I mean, it's important. But committed people spend a lot of time at work, and we need to recognise that.
Yeah, no, again, I completely agree with you. So what advice do you think that you'd give to anybody who's maybe on the same path that you were on?
Well, I think what I eventually learned is that behaviour is absolutely critical, and it's not just about what you say; it's about what you do and about how you do it. For instance, very simple example: if you are the MD of a business and you pull up in the car park in the morning, you get out of the car and you shuffle across the car park, and people can see you shuffling across the car park. They think, well, that guy doesn't look very energetic. He doesn't look like he knows particularly where he's going. He doesn't look like he's up for the day. If you get out your car and you stroll, you strut across the car park almost, head held high, good pace, and you walk into the office like that, that sets a completely different tone. And the thing to remember as a leader is that you are always on stage. You are always on stage, and people are watching, they're taking cues from you all the time because they think you know something that they don't. They're trying to work out what that is. So behaviour is absolutely critical, and it is about, as you said, Barbara, about being consistent. It's about understanding the impact that you have on other people. So, as a supervisor, you can make a flippant comment, and it's a flippant comment. As an MD in a big business, you make a flippant comment, and it can go like a wildfire, and it can cause real issues. So you have to be very careful about that. So consistency. Think about what's happening with the people around you. What does the world look like to them? Think about what they need to know, what they'd like to know about the business, and what are the messages that you should be giving them. So I think your behaviour as a leader is absolutely crucial, because that is what builds your credibility. It builds the respect that you need to earn, because you don't just get it because you've got a title. You have to earn the respect, obviously. And as I say, people are watching all the time, so it's very important.
Those fantastic tips. And again, just like what we've mentioned, these are things that you can be practicing all the time. You don't have to be an MD of an organisation to be able to look at how you're behaving and thinking about how you're coming across to people every single day. Yeah.
I think it's very easy for all of us, and like you say, it's not a leadership specific issue. It's very easy for us to overlook the impact we have on the people around us. And that's not a question of, if you start shouting and bawling at somebody or you're just Mr. Enthusiastic. It's not about that. It's more subtle than that. And, it's something that some people never get it. Some people have it from the day they're born. Some people learn it.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And certainly from some of the people that I'm talking to, it can be easy to get caught up in the day-to-day task, isn't it? And forget that when you're leading a team or managing a team, that is part of your role as well. And that you need to be thinking about the people around you rather than just what's on your to-do list.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy to get wrapped up in delivering the numbers, whatever they be, whether they be KPIs, whether they be financial numbers, whatever, safety numbers, but very, very important. It's very easy to get wrapped up in that when, as you say, what you need to do is actually spend time with people and create time in your diary, build time into your schedule to actually spend time with people. And I think as you get more senior roles, more and more of your time is spent in the HR function, if you will. So whether it's dealing with issues, whether it's thinking about succession, whether it's thinking about leadership development or functional development for people and training, that becomes more and more and more important, because ultimately that's your USP, your people, and that becomes more obvious as you get into more senior roles.
Yeah, so fantastic tips there. So what are you most proud of in your career?
That's a really good question. I think I'm really pleased in general with feedback I've received and the way people respond to my style, because I'm not kind of a conventional archetypal leader in terms of up and at 'em and let's jump out the trenches and everybody follow me and we'll all get shot together. I don't tend to have that style. So I've got quite an understated style, but people do respond to that. And it's not something I've particularly noticed, it's what other people tell me. So I'm quite pleased about that. But in terms of particular incidents, there's a couple of things that have happened in my career which were which were huge. And for instance, the print site I mentioned, we had a major fire there back in 2006, I think it was, which took out 20% of the capacity, which was already oversold. And we had some major decisions to make about what we did with the people, what we did with the equipment, how we kept our customers supplied. And we were able to manage the customer side of things, such that we didn't have any late deliveries. We used other printers wherever we could. We even had to go into Europe to source capacity. But you know, the team that were involved with that did a great job. So we never had any late deliveries of product. On the technical side, there's a lot of work went into investigating how the fire had occurred, dealing with insurance people, and deciding what to do with the equipment, and ultimately put together a project that involved a multi-million-pound investment to take this burnt piece of metal away, get it refurbished and reinstall it in another factory. So there was that side, the technical side of it, and then finally the people side. And we had a situation where, you know, we had to basically make 50 people redundant, and that's never easy. And we were able to do that in a way which didn't cause any disruption, and didn't cause too much animosity either. People, you know, understood what needed to happen. It wasn't anybody's fault that the fire had occurred. It was one of those things. But to manage through that sort of 6 to 12 months after that fire, you know, that was massive. And the people, it wasn't so much, you know, what I was doing, it was the people around me, what they were doing. They were just fantastic, and they did an absolutely brilliant job. So that's just an incident that sticks to mind.
And I find that fascinating, because I bet at the time that was, you know, it's everybody's worst nightmare, isn't it? That fire will have been your worst nightmare, and for you to look back in hindsight and say that's one of the things that you're most proud of. It's interesting how events turn around, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it was awful, because it couldn't have occurred at a worse time of year, which was, I think it was early November, and the print industry, even now, that's when it's at its busiest, because it's printing for Christmas, and so there's no capacity around. So it couldn't have happened at a worse time in that sense. It happened at 2 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and it was just one of those days where I couldn't even get to site, because my wife was away for the weekend. I got a 2-year-old daughter. I couldn't leave her. I couldn't even get to site to see what was happening until 10 o'clock in the morning. So it was pretty awful. And again, I was dependent on the people around me who did a great job. You know, it did take a lot of work. It took a lot of work over the next 12 months, but you know, the results were great. Yeah.
So how did you keep your head in that time, that of crisis mode?
Yeah, it's the thing is, that's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wrote that down in some notes that I made before the call. I think keeping calm is absolutely critical. Now, people say you should show passion, and absolutely you should, you know, and there's times and places for that. But in that particular situation, Barbara, it was about staying absolutely rock steady.
Yeah.
So everybody's watching, and they take their cue from you. If you go into a panic, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
You can't have that. You just cannot have it. So it's got to be measured. It's got to be, right, let's focus on what we do next. Let's get a plan together. Let's decide who's going to do what when, and just keep it very, very focused. And you know, keep people away from discussing how it happened and whose fault it might have been or whatever, and just focus on, right, what we're doing next, what we're doing tomorrow morning, you know, what we're doing tomorrow afternoon, and just keep it dead simple and dead focused.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, keep it simple, and that you're just focusing on the next action.
Yeah.
Because so often, don't we think about, we kind of get ahead of ourselves, don't we? And think, oh, we need to do that. And before we know it, we're overrun and overwhelmed.
Yes.
Whereas if we just focus on what's the next step, it's a lot easier.
No, you're right. And, you know, I mean, that's the example I've given there is quite extreme. And God forbid people watching this video end up in the same situation, but things go wrong in business. And there'll be different scales to what goes wrong depending on the business, but things go wrong. And as leaders, we've got to accept that. We don't live in a perfect world, and we may do a good job and our people may do a good job, but things will happen externally that can affect things, and things will go wrong. And that's when the leadership element really comes into it. It's easy to be a leader when things are going well. We all know that. It's dead easy, and it's good fun and all the rest of it. But when something goes wrong, that's when people look to you, and that's when you've got to step up to the plate, as it were, and like I say, show that degree of calmness. You've also got to be very clear that you've got some red lines, and one of those for me was we deliver to customers, we deliver on time.
So these are your non-negotiables. Is that what you mean by red lines?
That's right, yeah, non-negotiables. And it's about the simplicity, it's about the focus. So you're saying, right, that is one thing that we're not going to do. So we have to find a way to make that happen. Between the people in this room, we have to make that happen. And, you give people that clarity, that does help, yeah.
Yeah, and just bring them right back to your values and what actually matters.
Yes, yeah. And of course, the other element in that is the people side of things. They communicating with people is really important in those situations, but you've got to balance that with telling them something that means something.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do need to say to people, look, I'm not going to say anything about this until I've got some facts together, and it's going to be a few days. You're just going to have to live with it, because I'd rather do that than just give them a load of rubbish just to get them off my back, because that just stores up problems then.
Yeah, no. Right, so one thing that I ask everybody, Keith, is if you could recommend a book or a journal or anything, or a podcast, what would it be?
Well, mine's dead simple, which is this one. Who Moved My Cheese? I give this to all my clients. It's dead simple and it's short. Not everybody likes to read, so this is something that they can digest. But for me, it's fundamental, because if you're in a leadership role or a management role, your job is to change things. If you're not changing something, then you're not managing, you're not leading. So change and the process of change is absolutely fundamental. So when I'm talking to business owners, more often than not, the biggest barrier to changing their business is them. So getting them to think about the change process and how they need to be changing and thinking about that. This little book.
Fantastic. Love it. So Who Moved My Cheese? Yeah. Right. So thank you so much for your time today, Keith. I've really loved talking to you and hearing all about your journey, because we've known each other for a while and we've chatted, but I don't think we've ever really delved into your background. So it's really nice of me to sit here and listen.
Yeah, no, it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for the time, and hopefully it gives other people a perspective that they can use.